Mhm. देख लेना क्या क्या रखा है।
Very good evening and thank you for joining us. If you are watching live with Faye on YouTube, thank you for coming in. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, remember to subscribe to this channel, like the video and hit the bell icon so you can find out every time we put up a new video or if we have gone live. We're also very happy to have you suggest topics you'd like us to discuss or issues you'd like us to focus on. Every day at 8 o'clock and at 6:30, we talk about issues that we believe are of national importance. Today, we're going to talk about freedom of speech. Now, freedom of speech is a fundamental freedom in this country. As citizens of this country, we are all allowed the freedom to say what's on our mind, with, of course, some exceptions. Now, one would assume saying what's on your mind effectively includes social media. We've had some interesting sort of developments on the social media side over the last couple of months. Specifically, over the last 2 days, the Kerala government passed an ordinance that the Kerala governor gave his approval to, which basically allowed the police to arrest people if they posted something on social media or published something that was deemed offensive or threatening or bullying. Now, this included a prison term of 5 years, up to 5 years, or a fine of 10,000 rupees. Now, there was a lot of sharp reaction, incidentally, on social media against this. A lot of people call this the curtailing of freedom of speech. The fact that this ordinance was worded so loosely, it could have been used to crush the media, it could have been used against people who are criticizing the government. Now, because of the criticism that came from the general public, from the opposition, the Kerala government has rolled back ever so slightly and decided it will not implement this change until after it has had a chance to discuss this matter with other MLAs when their assembly is in session. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is not only the fact that Kerala attempted to bring in a fairly draconian law. We also have to look at what is being done right now with our existing laws. Across the country, in many states, people are being arrested for having posted something on social media. Let me give you a couple of examples. Journalist Patricia Mukim, who is an award-winning journalist in the Northeast, is right now facing a complaint that has been filed against her for a Facebook post. And when she went to the Meghalaya High Court, the High Court refused to quash the criminal proceedings against her for a post that she had put up on Facebook. Now, we know also that the Supreme Court in October had warned state governments that the police has been summoning citizens from one part of the country to the other part of the country over social media posts. The Supreme Court basically said, do not cross the line, let India remain a free country, end quote. There have been cases in Uttar Pradesh where journalists and ordinary citizens have been picked up and arrested by the police for social media posts that they have put up. Similar cases reported in Chhattisgarh, in Tripura, in Assam. Kerala, of course, we know what happened. In Maharashtra, one person arrested twice for posting something against the Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray and his son Aditya Thackeray. So it does seem like this is something most state governments are using right now. And we have to ask ourselves, where does this leave freedom of speech? But while we discuss that, we have to also discuss other problems. Fake news. Divisive news, divisive comments, trolling, bullying of women and bullying of children on the internet, and where the laws stand in protecting us from all of these things. Also, before any of my panelists point it out, let me first, mea culpa, take responsibility that a large part of this is because of the media. Because the media has not handled its responsibility really with care. The media has squandered its own respect and self-respect in a lot of cases, and as a result, it finds that there is a difficulty every time these arguments are being made before courts, and we have to, as members of the media, own up to what we have done wrong. Let me bring in my panelists this evening. We have Ms. Karuna Nundy, who's an advocate with the Supreme Court, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, who's a senior advocate with the Supreme Court, senior journalists Sharat, Pradhan, and Javed Ansari. I welcome all of you to this conversation. Thank you so much for making time. If I may start with Javed Ansari. Mr. Ansari, good evening. I did start off by pointing out that a lot of this is the media's fault because we have not behaved in a responsible fashion. But does that mean that we no longer have the freedom to say whatever we want to on social media? Do you worry about what you post before you post it, Mr. Ansari?
Look, for different reasons, I just don't post anything political or anything on current affairs. Strangely, for a journalist, I only post stuff on cricket and football, and even that I get abused for. So, this is the sad state of affairs. And you preempted me by saying that we in the media must tone up responsibility and must take responsibility. That such a day has come to pass. A lot of that responsibility also rests with us because we haven't done what was expected of us by self-regulating. We haven't been responsible in discharging the rights that have come our way. We are even guilty, I will go that so far as to say that some of us are even guilty of abusing those rights. But having said that, I am in principle opposed to arming the state or the police with sweeping powers, because there is more than enough evidence to prove that every time such a thing happens, these laws are abused. POTA, TADA, whatever you name it, all these laws are abused. And it's more often than not, this is used as a tool for political victimization, for settling scores, for vendetta. And therefore, even if laws have to be brought in, if they must be brought in, there have to be enough checks and balances. And this Kerala law, mercifully, wisdom has dawned a bit late, but nonetheless, on Mr. Vijayan, and he's put it in abeyance. But nonetheless, whoever before bringing in these laws, they need to go through a great amount of scrutiny and a great amount of oversight, because there have to be enough checks and balances, because they are liable to be misused. They've been misused in the past, and I can bet my last dollar they will continue to be misused.
Well, Mr. Ansari, quick follow-up question to you. You did say, of course, that you rarely post anything on social media as a journalist also because you're worried about the abuse and the trolling that comes with it. Do you believe that there should be laws that control the abuse and the trolling?
100%. 100%. I am past 60. I have more years behind me than ahead of me. And in the evening of my life, I have to be careful because of my name or what I post. If I post something, if India hasn't played well in cricket, or if they've been found wanting, and in my limited knowledge of cricket, if I critique that, I immediately aspersions are cast. If I feel that the Citizenship Amendment Act was not what the doctor ordered for India, then motives are attributed to me. I'm sick. I'm up to my neck with this. I mean, why continue with this? I would much rather. I've perhaps some would say that I've been cowardly and chosen chosen the easy way out, which is of withdrawing. But that's what I've done. This is what I've been driven to.
So that actually brings us to a really interesting point. And I want to bring in the lawyers at this point. Ms. Nundy, I'll start with you. Is it now a difficult balance to find a way to stop or to bring in a law, the trolling that Mr. Ansari describes? And we know that women on social media face face trolling that's really quite disgusting. How does a law stop the trolling but still protect freedom of speech?
When we speak of trolling, Mr. Souza, we speak of a variety of things. We speak of a barrage of speech that is distracting and annoying. And I think for that, the block button is most appropriate. And then we also speak of rape threats and death threats and cyber stalking. So we have to be very clear that the remedy is tailored to the problem. And that is also what our Constitution says. Our Constitution says really clearly that everything is free speech unless it comes within those 8 categories under Article 19(2) that is capable of being prohibited and limited, but also very clearly a long line of constitutional bench judgments even say that the remedy must be tailored to the harm. So therefore, when we have a situation that say a woman is being cyber stalked, right? We have a law against stalking that some of us worked on that came in the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013. What's the problem there? Is that because of the various patriarchies within Parliament, it was made bailable at the first offense, right? Now, also Section 503 and 506 in a large, most states actually is now bailable. What is 503 and 506? Where there is a threat. So what are you left with? You're left with a situation where somebody may even be physically following you home, or somebody may be saying repeatedly, incredibly online that I'm going to come to your house and rape you or kill you. And there is no immediate remedy in terms of the magistrates' hands are tied and they cannot place any strictures on the person's freedom. So it is a piece by piece remedy. There's a bill that Shashi Tharoor and I were sort of helming, that the Quint was championing, and that was placed before the Home Minister at the time, Rajnath Singh, to say that make it bailable at the first, make it non-bailable at the first offense, right? Which is not to say that you cannot get bail. It's to say that there has to be the possibility of restrictions on your freedom if such a complaint is made and it's found to be credible. So in similar ways, I think that laws have to be very specifically tailored to the harm without tampering, without limiting freedom of expression in a way that is not reasonable. At the moment, it's hugely overbroad. Our constitutional jurisprudence is not in sync with the IPC as it currently stands. If you look at that section 118D, I think it was, of the Kerala Act, I mean, what was really, really appalling was that you have a so-called progressive state that, you know, contrary to very clear existing jurisprudence. I was one of the counsel that argued Shreya Singhal and asked for it to be struck, section 66A to be struck down, right? And they said, you have similar words that have been not defined anywhere, that are overbroad, that have a chilling effect, that have some vagueness. At the first instance, got to have governments acting constitutionally, because constitutional challenges are limited. Government action is much wider. Constitutional challenges take time. The process is in the punishment. So therefore, I think it's really important that governments at the first instance pass laws that are in accordance with proper opinions that they get.
Mr. Sanjay Hegde, you know, I'm bringing the same question forward to you. If we consider action being taken against Patricia Mukim for a post that she put on Facebook, Vinod Dua put up a show on YouTube, Prashant Kanodia spent over a month in jail because of a tweet that he put up and then took down. Is there now a clear effort among all of our state governments to sort of control freedom of speech on social media? Is that worrying in your opinion?
Well, state governments or all governments would like to control social media for various reasons. Some of them are actually good. Now, supposing you have unverified rumors of cow slaughter, of child kidnapping, which leads to lynching, then it is best that the administration knows in advance or takes it down. So to that extent, a control of social media is certainly necessary. The broad oversight, yes. But all these cases that you have narrated very often are not the governments alone. They are private complainants. They are complainants from various parties and IT cells who want to check up on what an opponent is saying and want to put that opponent in trouble. So Patricia Mukim's case was basically one set of tribals versus the residents of that area and things like that. So where our laws are to a certain extent overbroad and can be applied in a variety of situations, you allege sedition, you allege causing disharmony between communities, and those kind of IPC laws can be used with deadly effect. by not only governments, but by private individuals. So the first thing that we really need to do is to take the sting of arrest away. Unless and until violence is being incited, social media posts should not lead to immediate arrests. Even where violence is incited, in a lot of cases, there are enough tools with the administration, including preventive detention, to do what is necessary. Take away the threat of immediate arrest, and especially with regard to journalists and all that, then you may have a more sane platform. You may have a more sane administration of the law in regard to the consequences of social media posts. But there must also be very quick remedies for defamation, for trolling, for cyberbullying, where the platforms themselves should be authorized to take it off as fast as possible. Right now, platforms avoid responsibility, saying that at the moment we get a court order, we will do that. Till then, we do have a duty to moderate, but if we do catch people doing it, or if it is pointed out or reported to us, we will try. But very often in countries like ours, where a lot of bullying goes underground because of the variety of languages that are spoken and the number of languages and codes in which these posts are made, there is no effective policing by the platforms themselves. So there is no one easy answer. However, governments arming themselves with overbroad legislation is certainly not on, because government action most directly impacts freedom of speech and also sets the design
Right.
under which legal proceedings continue.
Well, I'm going to now ask this question. Of course, there has been an argument, and we'll come to that, about the fact that defamation shouldn't, like Mr. Hegde pointed out, be criminal. We have criminal defamation in the country, and that actually allows for journalists to be prosecuted under the criminal law. Civil defamation would perhaps be a better route to it. But Mr. Ansari, as a journalist yourself, you did talk about the fact that you're worried about the trolling. But do you think there's also perhaps a move by state governments and by central government to make sure that people now think multiple times before tweeting anything, think multiple times before forwarding anything on WhatsApp, think multiple times before putting out their opinion? And that is not exactly, the signs of a fully free country, is it?
Certainly, and this is not the kind of environment a journalist would like to function in. I know of a lot of, we in Delhi and Mumbai, we are sort of insulated to a large extent from this kind of thing. But our colleagues who in the States, in the kind of things that they have to put up with, and God forbid if you happen to be a woman and a journalist, then the kind of things that you have to put up with is anybody's guess. You're constantly looking over your shoulder. The state is breathing down your neck. And journalists have been jugged in without bail, except in the case of one special journalist. All others are they're languishing. So this is a very difficult situation to be in, and this is a this is not conducive to good, free, fair, more than anything else, fearless journalism.
Karuna, what is the solution to that? And I do know, of course, that it's not just the journalists who are now perhaps withdrawing from being fearless, but ordinary citizens who have businesses to run, who have households and families to worry about, have stopped putting out their opinion because nobody really wants to take that risk.
We're talking about an overhaul of the political judicial economy. If you want my top points, I guess I'd say that there was a committee to look at the overhaul of criminal laws recently. Now, this was a completely non-consultative committee with a bunch of older gentlemen, Savarnas, all straight, apparently, completely unrepresentative, very few people, right? Now, yes, I think our criminal laws do need an overhaul, but we don't want to jump from the frying pan into the fire. So I think what needs to happen is an examination of the IPC and other laws, and to bring them in accordance with the speech laws, and to bring them in accordance with the constitutional jurisprudence as it currently stands, which is actually pretty good at the moment, right? I think that's something that needs to happen. The second thing is that we need our police forces, and I do a number of workshops in the National Judicial Academy, but I think we need an even more concerted effort with our with our lower judiciary in particular, looking at how to implement speech laws as they stand, because even as they stand, you have to read wherever, you have to read them in accordance with Article 19.1 and 19.2 in constitutional jurisprudence, right? So I think that's important. The third thing I think is that the copies of the IPC and other criminal laws that are supplied to the local constable, because there are cognizable offenses here, right? Should have very clearly and simply in perhaps the words of the statute themselves. And so whenever there's a judgment, I think reading down a statute, the words of the statute should then be formulated and then placed in new editions of the IPC. I think that's something that's very important. But in addition, I think that we need our governments to act in accordance with the Constitution at the outset. Is that going to happen? Possibly not. And so then, therefore, what is required is for the courts to be the sentinels, on the qui vive, the sort of sentiment, the guardians of fundamental rights that they were required to be and designed to be, the constitutional courts. And in addition, I think there needs to be a certainty and predictability in how justice is administered. So therefore, I think the unpredictability of allocation of cases, which the 4 judges had protested, but then in turn, perhaps some, when they became chief justices, there were protests against them on the same issue. But the issue of the master of the roster, which is that how do cases get allocated in the Supreme Court? How do cases get allocated in other courts? I think there has to be very clear predictability in how that happens. And in a time of huge polarization, what needs to happen is that the text of the law and precedent must be followed vigorously, so that you have consistency, that the very basic principle in the law of stare decisis does not fall short.
I just want to read out a couple of messages that are coming in. Bharat Raval says, we're already seeing governments put journalists in jail. Do we really need another law to give them even more power to do so? Vishal Agniotri supporting us there financially. Thank you. Shri Kumar also, thank you for your contribution. Mr. Sanjay Hegde, I'm going to a theoretical question really. On one hand, our constitution says that we have the fundamental freedom of expression. On the other hand, we see across the country people being put in jail for causing enmity, for offending, for UAPA, for terrorism, all kinds of laws being brought in to curb this freedom of expression. So actually, in theory, do we really have this freedom?
Well, we never had full freedom. Immediately after the constitution was promulgated, was brought into effect, then you had the First Amendment, which substantially cut down the freedom of speech also. The entire basis of freedom of speech, to a certain extent, is jurisprudence from the US Supreme Court, especially Justice Holmes, who said that there must be a free exchange in the marketplace of ideas. You may have bad ideas, but they must necessarily be expressed so that they are driven, that they are refuted, and that's how human thought proceeds. Justice Holmes wrote that around the First World War, when ideas were exchanged in print, were exchanged ever so slowly, and where speech itself was not subject to great commercial interests. Today, we have bad ideas which can be propagandized, which can go viral on social media, which can be loudly shouted on propaganda channels. And when you purvey propaganda, you spread hate, you make money. So I am not really sure that commercial speech or advertisement of a certain kind or propaganda, anything which has a financial impact, either for the positive or the negative, both on the speaker as well as on the listener, should that get a free pass anymore? This is, since you asked me conceptually.
No, I agree with you. And this is a question right now. We'll also have Sharat Pradhan. We lost him in the middle of this conversation. And I want to rephrase right now to address exactly what you have said. And I'm so glad you brought it up. On one hand, we have journalism of, if we want to call it that, of the most divisive kind, which is telling our country to hate each other, which is ripping people apart. And several months later, we discover from the courts that none of this was true. We have on YouTube, for example, people who put out complete conspiracy theories and make money of the fact that conspiracy theories are popular. During the Sushant Singh Rajput case, there were several people who popped up, channels who popped up, handles that popped up. There were completely cooking up stories that made money out of that cooking up of completely false stories. So there is a need, definitely, to bring in some law. But how do you balance these two things? Because as soon as a law is brought in, it can be used to shut down honest journalism. It can be used to shut down criticism of government. And invariably, as we know, not just current present governments of state and center, but governments in the past have used laws to shut down whoever was criticizing them. Mr. Ansari, back, in the emergency gets referred to many, many times, but it's not just the emergency. Almost every successive government after that has chipped at the structure of freedom of speech slowly to bring it to a point where that structure can now be brought down. There is actually culpability in everybody's hands. How do we regulate a media that should be self-regulated and is not self-regulated right now?
Like Mr. Qureshi said in one of your programs, if I'm not mistaken, that perhaps there needs to be an independent body of consistent, drawn up of eminent citizens, former jurists, maybe, some editors involved as well, because obviously this system is not working. This system is breaking and it needs to be fixed. If we don't do this, the governments will step in. And it's a no-brainer to say that all governments would want media's powers to be shackled or to be curbed, certainly, to varying degrees. Some would want us totally shackled. Some would want curbs put. Others would want us to just shut shop and become, become cheerleaders, which most of us unfortunately have become.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, again, I come back to the same old belief that we in the media, unless we get our act together, unless we bring in the correctives that are needed, we can continue to cry horse, but the responsibility rests with us also. Unless we can bring in the correctives, the governments will step in or somebody will step in, and then all these rights that we take for granted, a lot of them will cease to exist, and part of that blame will have to rest with us as well.
Mr. Pradhan, how do you regulate a media that shouldn't be regulated?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry there were some issues, some problem, bit of a problem here. That's why I was out of your show. Let me, as far as the controls are concerned, I feel there's a larger issue, as you rightly pointed out, that irrespective of political party, They all want the media to be under their thumb, the political leaders. And this has been growing. This is on account of growing intolerance, which is a very serious matter. In a democracy, if you continue to have people who are intolerant of criticism, I feel there need to be freedom. These controls, I'm absolutely against these special laws that are being made. They are making it convenient for those people who want to, to take it out on independent media. And it is the sufferers are going to be the people who are going to be on the target are those who are straight and upright people doing their job. You will find at the end of the day, it is not the rogues who deserve to be set right. There'll be nothing against them. That is the tragedy. And you have to distinguish between responsible media and irresponsible media. And if media is irresponsible, there are enough laws to take care of them. I don't think there is any need for special laws right and at this juncture, because now you are giving a handle to those in power, irrespective of political party, and particularly in regimes like on the BJP ruled state, where they do not like to entertain independent media. They want only subjugated completely media under their thumb. We are seeing it. I mean, it's an open secret. So, if somebody like the Kerala Chief Minister tries to do that, then how the hell are you going to stop people like Yogi Adityanath in Uttar Pradesh, where already there have been umpteen cases of media, of harassment of journalists. You've all heard of this case of Prashant Kanodia. And it is not just getting booked in a case and being dumped in jail. It is so difficult. This fellow, I am aware of this case because I was one of his, I went to get his bail carried out because they were not getting, what they call zamanatis. So somebody rang me up from Delhi. So sureties. So they wanted somebody to become a surety. I didn't know Prashant Kanodia at all, but I agreed to do that. But the cumbersome procedures, Mr. Hegde, you all need to do, and Ms. Nundy, you all need to do something about it. Even after the fellow was granted bail after 2 months by the High Court, it took 23 days to get him out of jail because the procedures are so stupid and so cumbersome. For a small thing, and at every stage, you have to pay somebody. That lawyer was telling me, कि साहब इंसाफ मिलता नहीं है, इंसाफ बिकता है. This is what the local lawyer in Lucknow told me. Because he said that every desk that they have to approach, they have to pay money. Their merits don't matter at all. Then what is the point of the High Court granting bail when it cannot be executed? And this is happening particularly. And they were told, that night, my own documents that I submitted for my car, which is a CIS. So they wanted a surety for 50,000 rupees. I'm just giving this, I'm stretching it a little too far, but I want to explain and want for people to know how difficult it is even to get a bail granted by the High Court executed. Those papers, they said now this will have to go to the RTO. I said, okay, I'll speak to the RTO and get them verified immediately. Okay, but then they said, oh no, but what you have brought is a scanned copy. I said, I'll give you the original tomorrow. No, we can't do it. We're on a scanned copy. My address, somebody comes to my house for verification. I said, all right, I happen to live in a government colony. And the fellow says, okay, theek hai. The next day, his sub-inspector calls me, कि साहब वो आपने अपना मूल पता नहीं लिखा है. That is my permanent address. I said, I don't have a permanent address. I don't have a house of my own. He said, then कोई गाँव आओ तो होगा. I said, no, my father never told me कौन सा गाँव है. So then he says, कि neighbor से verify करना पड़ेगा. So I had to tell him that my next door neighbor happens to be the defense minister of the country. His son is allotted that house, but he comes and lives there. So Rajnath Singh. So I said, you can go and verify from there. And then I shouted at him. I said, to hell with you and to hell I'll deal with you. Then, the papers. So just imagine how difficult it is. And this harassment, then I was told, eventually I had somebody to speak to the judge who had to release this poor fellow. So when we speak to him, you know what he said? He said, कि साहब बड़ा difficult मामला है क्योंकि government के highest level से ये monitor हो रहा है. तो otherwise मैं और किसी का होता तो scan papers पे कर देता. Now this is how, because when the government decides to harass you, you just can't do anything. And these laws are designed only to harass, not to get anybody justice. It is to satisfy their own inflated egos, the political leaders. So we need to stop. These laws are not required at all.
So some very important points to be picked out of that interesting story that Mr. Pradhan pointed out. Point number one is that process is punishment in this country. Just getting process. The idea is that, chalo, even if I get picked up, I will have my day in court. But before you reach that day in court, the process itself, the paperwork, the fact that Siddiqui Kapoor has not been able to sign a wakalatnama with his lawyer for over a month. And that's when you engage the lawyer. Yeah. If you don't allow you to meet the lawyer, how will you sign that wakalatnama? This process is punishment. And the other fact is that you need to have someone who can pull strings for you within the system, who can speak to a judge, who can speak to the RTO, who can get it done. If you don't have that access, what happens to you? And I just also want to point out that while Mr. Pradhan is speaking specifically about Uttar Pradesh because he lives in Uttar Pradesh, this is actually right now happening across the country. Let me give you an example of Maharashtra. There was a man who lived in Nagpur, a resident of Nagpur, who tweeted, calling the chief minister of Maharashtra and his son names. That man was picked up immediately. When he was finally released on bail, he was picked up again by the police on a different count. So this is happening across the board. Sanjay Hegde, one, of course, is the fact that process is punishment. And what Mr. Pradhan is pointing out, that the system is currently so difficult that it's possible to keep someone away from their lawyer. It's possible just to make the paperwork so difficult that the day in court doesn't actually become an even right to everyone.
Yes, that is exactly what I keep saying, that India won independence from the British. But the task of our generation is to make for free men and women within the country. That has never happened. I am coming down to this conclusion that human liberty is not valued in this country. We routinely toss people into jail. When we argue for bail, it is not as if we are asking for a right to bail. We are asking for a favor, and then it has to be satisfied that there is no criminal antecedent, that the prosecution case is unlikely to succeed, that the prosecution has to be heard, and it goes on and on. And even after we get bail, the entire process that Mr. Pradhan narrated, it is there in every state. Yes. So if you are poor, if you are powerless, then it is more likely that you will simply rot inside the prison for much more than the maximum that could be served. There, I think it is not politically sexy for any politician to say, look, I am going to unclutter the prisons. Only hardcore violent offenders who need to be imprisoned, or people who have been sentenced to prison after a full trial, will be kept there. Otherwise, if somebody stays on for more than a particular period of time, the question is, why should the state keep them against their will?
Mr. Hegde, just to explain to our audience what you said, basically, an individual can be accused of something where the maximum sentence for that particular crime could be 5 years. But tareek ke chakkar mein, that person could wind up sitting in jail for 6 years waiting for his day. Is that a possibility?
Yes, very certainly. Very certainly. Because you may be accused of maybe robbery, and but how do we know that in the trial that there could not be fresh charges added at a later stage. So unless there's a specific order of bail, unless there is somebody who's actually looking out for getting the person out of jail, it just doesn't happen. And there are several other stories associated with it. When a woman is sent to jail and she has a child, often that child grows up in jail because there's no one else to look after it. There are, we just have tied ourselves as a country, and I'm not blaming any government. We've tied ourselves in so much process that we forget that there are real life humans at the end of each case, at the end of each process. So that's why I keep saying,
Yes.
hold human liberty in high esteem. That is something that I do not see in this country.
That's a very unfortunate thing. Balu Ambedkar has asked a very important question that I want to bring to Mr. Ansari. He says, freedom of speech of the common man is being undone so much that no government in the future would like to restore it. And that brings me to my next question, Mr. Ansari. And I was talking about how the structure of freedom of speech is being chipped away at from emergency onwards by every successive government. It has weakened it and weakened it to a point where it can come down. Irrespective of which government or what ideology we're talking about, is it in the interest of any political party and any government to restore freedom of speech? Or are they likely to all benefit and hence revel in it? The fact that there is no freedom right now.
I won't go this far to say that all political parties want freedom of speech to be taken away. No, certainly not. But they would certainly want to curb the media's right to criticize and to report without fear or favor. They would certainly want curbs to be imposed on it. They would certainly want to arm twist the media in any manner they can in order to ensure that they fall in line. Some do it crudely, like the Uttar Pradesh chief ministers. Others are a bit more subtle about it. But the fact is that nobody wants to give you unfettered freedom as far as the media is concerned. Yes, individuals can go about saying what they want, but they don't matter. But so long as the media can be kept under the cosh, everybody would be very happy with it.
Mr. Pradhan?
Yep. Well, as I said earlier, political leaders and political parties are becoming increasingly intolerant. Fundamental democratic values are just dying. And that is, it's a matter of serious concern, because, I feel that freedom should not be curbed at any cost. People have to realize that in a democracy, even if you're criticized, what is the big deal? Even if a politician is called names, unless he's actually guilty, he should not be reacting. Can you conceive of a position in the earlier days, in the freedom movement days of anyone, or in the early freedom days, when leaders would react like that? No. And the laws that were there in the Constitution of India, I think it's been enough laws are there, enough sections are there to take action against people. But they want summary trials, they want instant action, so that the message is sent, so that their egos is satisfied. It is not about teaching a lesson to them, and it is not. It's about sending a message that, look here, if you play with me, I'll make your life hell. That is the attitude. That is a completely feudal approach. And a feudal approach in a democratic setup is certainly should not be welcome. Something needs to be done. It is not just self-regulation. Fine, self-regulation should be there, and I'm sure a lot of the media and people like you are not violating the laws. You are a lot of channels also, but actually those who did that. One big time editor who went to jail recently, he was violating all the laws day in and out. Nothing was done against him until somebody else took up the matter because of other reasons, and then something came up, and then you start saying that, oh, my freedom, and the whole the entire BJP leadership is busy crying for him, for that particular journalist. So, it is becoming so badly, just as the country is getting divided on religious lines, which the political leaders want it to. Unfortunately, the media is also getting divided in the same lines.
Yes.
Sad. So there is no objectivity. Or there's no objectivity.
I just want to bring in Mr. Sanjay Hegde, my last question, which is this. Is social media right now, and we know that it's extremely powerful in being able to shape public opinion, is social media a monster that political parties have danced with, but at some point don't know how to control because it is a monster that is getting out of hand? So they're also, while they benefit from it a great deal, they're also all extremely afraid of it.
Yes, because many of them have been elected due to social media. Trump made it a point saying that he would never have been elected without Twitter. And it was social media which was also his downfall. So politicians like social media when it elects them, but are very wary of it. They do like to control it, and influencers who do not particularly care for them, they would like to have the stick of punishment also available. So let's assume that the Kerala government had decided to go ahead with its ordinance. You can bet your life that some people could have been pulled from various states which were not, which were of a different political persuasion. So a Prashant Kanodia kind of person was pulled from Delhi to Uttar Pradesh. There may have been a few people who could have been pulled from Uttar Pradesh to Alleppey or something of that kind.
So, Mr. Hegde, you're saying effectively, if any state in our country writes or passes a law like Kerala did, which thankfully a draconian, horrible law that they have yielded and said that they will not implement right now, in that case, that state could walk into someone's house anywhere in the country and pick you up saying you tweeted something about the Kerala Chief Minister. Hence, Sanjay Hegde, I'm arresting you out of your home in Delhi. Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely. They've done it. They've done it all the time. And why are we worried about only Kerala and Uttar Pradesh where we have friends? You can be taken off to Arunachal Pradesh.
But tell me, Mr. Hegde, I just want to know one thing.
Yes.
Do you think that social media is becoming or is likely to become as powerful as it is in a country like United States? In India, do you think because to get somebody to win an election? Because
of course,
in India,
of course, why are we restricting social media only to Twitter and Facebook? WhatsApp is equally social media. There are so many things. The young communicate on Instagram. So campaigns are designed dependent on the platform. There are certain things which are put out on Facebook. There are different things for WhatsApp, and I do not think the current government would have been elected but for its mastery of social media. Now the question is, what happens when they find somebody else who has understood what their game is and who has a counter game? At that point of time, what do the entrenched do in terms of more and more draconian laws or of catching?
You think rural penetration is as much as what we do have in the urban areas in India?
Certainly.
Oh, greatly. I had a junior who was dealing with NRC cases who went off to distant Assam and the interior regions of it in what were called Bodo tribal networks, and even there you had the Reliance network working, and you had special phones also which popped up with one or two very familiar faces from Delhi.
The social media's ability to create trouble, to stigmatize, demonize people, to build up a hate campaign, to build up a hate narrative is immense. in the 2014 elections, we were a part of the Aaj Tak India Today team, which was touring UP, and we went to Muzaffarnagar. And
I was there with you all.
And somebody showed us a video saying, look, these are people from the minority community playing football with the heads of some of our own. And my editor was there also, and he checked it. And then after some time, when we cross-checked, we learned that this was a video. This clip had been taken from a video from Afghanistan and was being passed. Until we pointed out, I'm sure hundreds of thousands of people must have seen this, and they all believed it. They were willing to argue till the cows came home that this was true. So its ability to create mischief, to do damage, to create this hate environment is immense. And they've contributed. I agree with Sanjay and Faye that they've contributed to a very large extent in building a narrative in favor of those who are in power now.
Yes, in fact, K.R. Shivam has commented in our chat window saying, I was in the Joe Biden volunteer program. We worked for 12 hours almost entirely on social media. So we have to acknowledge the fact that politics is largely being played on social media. And so now it is a monster that they have created that is threatening almost everything that we hold dear. Any last comments, gentlemen, before we run out of time? Mr. Pradhan, you looked like you had to say something. You wanted to say something?
No. I'm in support. I quite understand. I was ignorant of the fact. I confess that social media had so much penetration in the rural areas so as to influence. I mean, I can understand urban and semi-urban, but because the vast majority of the country, we still have so much poverty and that the people can't afford Android phones. So how is it working? That's very strange.
No, data is the cheapest in India, and people do have Android phones. So many of those cases that you heard during the lockdown, where the only asset was the Android phone, and then they sold that, and when they began their walks home. So the phone is what captures everybody's mind space. And my quick last comment on freedom of speech is that famous quote from Field Marshal General Idi Amin Dada of Uganda. I can guarantee you freedom of speech, but freedom,
no freedom
after
speech is another question.
Well, on that extremely worrying note, gentlemen, thank you so much for giving us your time. I just want to remind our viewers, the fundamental rights and the freedoms granted to us by our Constitution is a right. Fundamentally, a fundamental right by definition means nobody can take it away from you. You can't even willingly give it away. That's what a fundamental right means. And we have to also remember that Constitution that we inherited is not ours to squander. We don't own it. We are custodians of it for the next generation. So we have to make sure that we keep it in mint condition so that we can hand it over, maybe a better society, a more healthy society, to the next generation. That's our responsibility. Thank you for watching. Good night.